Hello everybody, John 12 back here again with another video, and today I bring you another Dragon Ball Z movie review, a part of my 13 days of Dragon Ball Z. Today I give you my review for the 7th DBZ animated feature titled Dragon Ball Z Super Android 13. Now before I get into this actual review, I wanted to state real quick that for the longest time, for me personally, I know there's a lot of, people who forgive and forget, or even for the cheapest or the crappiest of the DBZ, franchise, people still care for it. I mean, it's kind of like GT. GT obviously gives nothing to us, with the exception of Super Saiyan 4. But you still love it because it's a part of the DBZ franchise, the Dragon Ball franchise. You love it and you hate it at the same time. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But nonetheless, for me, the number one movie in the DBZ lineup that I always disliked has to be Super Android 13. When I was a kid, for the longest time, even till now, I still kind of don't like it, but for the longest time, I really hated Super Android 13, and a lot of that has to do with my first viewing of it, because when I was a kid, we didn't really get all the DBZ movies right away. Well, dubbed, rather. We didn't really get them right away, of course. We either had the anime series that was going on Toonami or Cartoon Network, and you couldn't even get DBZ the way you get it today. Like, kids today, they can get it online, they can watch it for free on YouTube, they can buy the Blu-rays online or on Best Buy or whatever the fuck. You could do that now. Back in the day, you had to fucking buy a tape and fucking record over the shit when you were fucking cheap as fuck like me. Or, if you had money, you go to a store and you buy the tapes who already had pre-existing episodes, which only were like a handful, less than a handful, probably like 3 or 5 episodes tops, in a tape that costs as much as a Blu-ray today. So that's the kind of reality I was living at in my Dragon Ball Z fandom, which is why I always put the middle finger in front of little kids today. He's like, fuck you. You have a good life. Fuck you. But back in the day, the movies didn't really come out the way they used to. The way today you get it a Blu-ray, fucking awesome. You get a really good HD version online. You can download it, what have you. Nonetheless, Super Android 13, when it first came out, I didn't really have access to it. None of us really had access to it, but a friend of mine bought it, and I decided to go to his house to watch it. And instead of having the version that you could watch right now online for free, mind you, hence the word, I had to watch this really cheap bootleg. I can't remember what dub it was. It was definitely not English, I can tell you that. It was either a Japanese or Spanish dub bootleg of DBZ Super Android 13. On a shitty-ass TV, back in the good old days when TVs were 4 times the size of TVs today, so you can only imagine the quality. It was the shittiest experience I ever had watching a DBZ movie. And there's only 3 occasions where I had a really shitty ass time watching a movie, which is Return of Cooler. I had a bad time watching it my first time because my tape, once again going back to the VHS tapes, the tape was damaged, so it kind of had burn marks all over it. Second one was the BoJack Unbound, which it had this weird replay in the actual movie. It kept breaking when you reached the Hercules things. And then you have the Super Android 13. For me, those are my 3 main, big downfalls, first viewings of these movies. So ever since then, I always hated this movie. But for my 13 days of Dragon Ball Z, I decided to re-watch Super Android 13 on a better quality. Well, not technically better, because there's not really a specific HD version I came across online. There probably is, but I wasn't really looking that hard. Nonetheless, I watched a better version on YouTube, which you could do right now. Although I prefer, support the DBZ and, series. Fucking buy a legitimate version you can hold in your hands, you freaking bastard kids. Nonetheless, I rewatched Super Android 13, and it's not as crappy as I remember it used to be. It's definitely still not on par with other movies I consider to be superior, like, for instance, Tree of Might, Lord Slug, Cooler's Revenge, not even Return of Cooler, which, rewatching it, kind of has the same kind of color palette and animation style, but I think the ironic thing, going back into watching this in comparison, they actually rehash a lot of things from Return of Cooler for this movie, which is kind of similar to how they did Lord Slug and Cooler's Revenge back to back. So in this case, they kind of did the same thing, like the animation style, the color palette, has the same kind of feel. The only difference is, when you watch Return of Cooler, it still has a grandness, and it has this, like, really good stylistic choice with the characters and designs and the atmosphere of the movie. For this one, rewatching it, it's very crude. Like, the designs of the characters are very crude. The animation is very, very not on par with the other movies. It's just, it's still, even with this, like, current version, it still has like a weird, I want to say bootleg version. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's hard to say it without, like, spoiling it, because, you know, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already seen it because it's already free online. But if you watch it online, it just has that feel of, like, having a bootleg kind of action sequences. And that's not me trying to put it down, but that's how it kind of comes off, you know. For me personally, the only sequences that have any kind of real legitimacy to it has to be every sequence that happens in the city, which are my favorite. Those are actually definitively my favorite sequences in the entire movie. Everything that has to take place within the city. Everything else is cool and all. The action's nice. It's fun. It's a fun DBZ movie. But it still has that bootleg kind of feel. And also, based off my first viewing of it when I was a kid, way back in the day, when you had to fucking own, when VHS tapes were the Blu-rays of my generation. That was a real world, kids. Nonetheless, let's get right down into some interesting points about this movie. First off, it features one of the more interesting villains ever in the DBZ history, which is, of course, the current villain, Android 13. And, of course, you guessed it, this takes place, in the time placement-wise, in the Android saga. Once again, I don't know what the significance being is that this roughly takes place post-Android saga, but there's a lot of weird things that don't really come into play. Like, first off, there's no real android threat, and based off what Goku says, he already faced the androids. So this has to be referencing after the defeat of the androids and when Cell, I guess, absorbs them. But that doesn't make any sense, because none of the other characters look the way they should during that time. And plus, where's Cell? Why isn't he around? Why aren't they, like, in a state of panic like they were during the Cell games, what have you? And plus, Gohan's not a Super Saiyan. What the fuck's with that? Nonetheless, that's kind of where it is. And Android 13 is the main antagonist of this film. And he, along with various other androids in this movie, Android 14 and 15, were created and designed by Dr. Gero, who was killed in the beginning of this film by, of course, Android 17 and 18. Like in the actual storyline of the series. Nonetheless, Dr. Gero designed a supercomputer in the bowels of his cave, his bat cave, if you will. A supercomputer was with the brain of Dr. Gero was designing androids in the wake of his death, and they created 14 and 15 and 13 with the sole purpose of killing and destroying the Saiyans, particularly Goku, and, you know, the normal type of shit that, you know, Dr. Gero gave the androids orders for, which is, of course, kill Goku, kill the Z-Warriors, world domination. There you go. That's pretty much the gist of the androids and what their purpose is. But unlike 1718, they actually go through with the actual mission of trying to take them down. So that's kind of the sole purpose of their being. And it just goes on from there, like normal kind of DBZ storylines that you expect. They go, you know, everything. It's a peaceful day on Earth. Everybody's having a nice time. Goku's shopping with Chi-Chi and Gohan. Trunks, Krillin, and Master Roshi are trying to see naked chicks. And yes, you guessed it, this is the first actual theatrical appearance of future Trunks, which I kind of find weird that they never featured him in the prior movie. But nonetheless, it's still kind of cool to get Trunks in here. I mean, Future Trunks is hands down one of my favorite characters in the entire series, and he's my favorite version of Trunks. And I'm pretty sure he's a lot of our most DBZ fans' favorite version of Trunks. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kid Trunks, he's cool. Teen Trunks from the End of Z is okay. Not to mention, GT is kind of like the worst version of Trunks, if you will, that no one really likes. But Future Trunks is, hands down the best. He's, the coolest. He has the best storyline. He's, voiced by Eric Vale. Where can you go wrong from there? Nonetheless, this is his first appearance in the actual fucking movie. On top of all this awesomeness, the funniest thing about this movie is that this is the number one movie with the most censored sequences in this movie. This is possibly the number one most censored movie out of all the DBZ movies, and that has a lot to do with the violence and I don't want to say racist, but like edgy kind of terminology that characters use in this movie, which is the banter between characters, and of course the fighting and action that happens between characters, which is of course most notably Android 13. Once he becomes Super Android 13, when he's fighting Goku, he actually grabs Goku by the leg and punches him in the dick. So yeah, that's kind of like the defining moment in violence and why this movie is so edited. So, kids aren't like, yeah, I want to punch you in the dick. That's not a good thing, kids. Don't do that. That's not really nice. But nonetheless, this movie is kind of right up there in the violent era. And not to mention, there's a whole bunch of, profanity and slurs, kind of how I do in my videos that, some people find annoying. I don't give a shit. That's the way it is. Nonetheless, like the song, there's a lot of censorship that goes into this movie, like Android 13's banter, Trunks' banter, just various slurs and profanity that's used between characters. So this is a very censored kind of movie. And also, a big thing that goes into Android 13 that I want to mention is that another thing I really didn't like about his character is that he had the cheapest design out of the androids. I mean, the androids in this movie have a very unique kind of design out of the gate. I mean, of course, one of them is like this gigantic Hulk-looking guy with a fucking braided hair, which I don't understand why. And then you have the little guy who's purple and obviously very racist character. I don't really care. I mean, it's a Japanese property. What do they know about racism? They don't know shit. Of course, this is back in the 90s. No one knew shit about racism back then. Who knew I didn't even understand what the word meant. But now looking back at it, that character is very racist. He's like the Mr. Popo of the fucking androids. That's a very racist character. But you know what? We're going to forgive it. It's like the Black Ranger in Power Rangers. It's okay. It's okay. We lived with it. We grew up with it. It's okay. Nonetheless, he's kind of like based off this 70s pimp. New York pimp. I always thought was funny. And then you have Android 13, who's a redneck. So I always found it interesting that, I guess Toriyama had these designs, if you will, for these characters. It's like, I don't know what he was going with it, but I don't know. I guess he was trying to go for a real world kind of feel, because that's, with the exception of Cell, the androids do kind of have a very unique and kind of worldly kind of feel. Like, the androids 17 and 18 are kind of obviously human, and these androids are kind of based off humans, so I guess it kind of goes hand in hand. Nonetheless, the androids obviously try to seek out Goku to try and kill him, and then you have another first for this movie, which is a Super Saiyan team-up, which is a new trait that gets followed in future movies, of course. And the Goku with Future Trunks, and joining with them Vegeta, with another really awesome badass tagline, and of course coming right out of the gate like a boss, once kind of similar to his appearance in Return of Cooler, joins the team to hopefully destroy the androids. They have a nice time basically defeating 14 and 15, but once 13 absorbs and fuses with the components and technology of 14 and 15, becomes Super Android 13, which was a very interesting choice in a design once again, which was this giant Hulk-like blue guy with orange, Vegeta-like hair, or like Vegito-type hair, if you will. Which I also thought was very interesting. Like, I remember seeing that as a kid prior to watching this movie, and I was just thinking, what the hell is this guy? Who is this guy? It says logo DBZ. I've never seen this guy in the cartoon series. Remember when that happened? That's another thing that used to happen a lot, where you would get toys, the shit that we never got to see, because obviously this is pre-existing Japanese, but we didn't get it until like the 2000s. So we're like, what the fuck is this? Who is this? Who is this Super Android 13? Who is this Blue Hulk? Who is he? I didn't see him in the series, but nonetheless, that's kind of just another rant from my past. And of course, none of the Super Saiyans are basically capable of taking down Super Android 13. Goku at the end has to use a Spirit Bomb, once again using one of the most usable plot traits in most DBZ movies is, of course, using a Spirit Bomb to try and use against the villain. But the thing that I really liked, and kind of the number one thing I do like out of this movie and enjoyed, was that they kind of twisted it around and used the Spirit Bomb more or less as energy for Goku to use in a fight, where Goku becomes a Super Saiyan while using the Spirit Bomb, absorbs the energy and power of the Spirit Bomb, and uses it to basically demolish Super Android 13, which is pretty badass. I think that's something that we can all agree, regardless of the animation style or the crudeness and designs, that was a pretty badass sequence. And I wish we could get a lot more of that. But then again, we kind of do on occasion, that Goku, uses that to his advantage. I think he also kind of did that in Battle of Gods when he was trying to deflect Beerus's attack against Earth. He kind of did the same thing, where he kind of deflected it without, killing anybody. Nonetheless, this is a pretty interesting movie, to say the least. There's a lot of things I aren't really into in this. I don't like the designs of the characters, although I find them funny and enjoyable now, but I wasn't really ever crazy about them. The rehashing of music I wasn't really big into, although I kind of enjoyed like the techno kind of hip hop kind of feel that they gave it to 14 and 15 when they're walking through the city. I like that. I also liked some of the violence and profanity that was used in this movie, although it's kind of unnecessary, but it was funny nonetheless. But it's just not my favorite movie out of the lot. It's kind of similar to Dead Zone, World's Strongest, movies like that. Or they're just not... When I think of DBZ movies, I don't really see this. And I know a lot of people enjoy this movie. They're like, yeah, fucking Goku, Vegeta, Trunks, Super Saiyan, kicking ass. I know a lot of people like it for that kind of trait, but for me personally, rewatching this movie, it still has that bootleg kind of feel to it. The animation isn't on par with like prior movies, and it's just not the best out of the lot for me. I like the city sequences. I love the Goku shopping with Chi-Chi and Gohan, those moments. I enjoy those kind of real world kind of moments prior to the action. I know a lot of people find that unnecessary and boring, where like they're just like 5-year-old kids again. They're like, yeah, get to the action. I'm okay with it. I like that kind of moments. And I also really enjoyed the moments where the top of the skyscraper kind of gets blown up, and like Goku and Gohan and Krillin and whoever like escapes, but saving all the people who are on that actual building. I always thought that was really badass, because for me personally, you look at other characters from like, let's say Marvel or DC or whatever, they escape, but there's like a whole bunch of destruction that happens in the background. But when it comes to DBZ characters, and this is what I want freaking kids to know, is that they freaking saved those people. You see that in fucking Man of Steel? No. You see that in the Avengers? A little bit, not really. Goku's the one who's saving the people. He's the fucking backbone of the superhero genre. That's what I want fucking kids to know. But nonetheless, it's a pretty funny movie. First appearance of Trunks, awesome. Action is okay. Animation wise, not really that great. Music wasn't really that great. It's just a rehash of Return of Cooler. And I like the appearance of Vegeta. It was also funny. And I also enjoyed the ending. This has to be one of my favorite, funniest endings to a movie, which is, of course, spoilers, Piccolo and Vegeta sitting in a freaking igloo or whatever in the middle of nowhere, and of course Piccolo asks him, "Is it over yet?" And Vegeta states, when the fish jumps out of the water, and the fish just jumps out, and it's like, okay, it's over. I thought that was just always an enjoyable, funny kind of ending note to the movie. But nonetheless, I have to give this a good, I want to say 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. It's a 6 out of 10. It's an enjoyable movie to watch, but it's not the best out of the lot, and it's definitely not my favorite DBZ movie, especially for future movies that come, like Broly or whatever, which I can't wait to review. Are definitely not on par. But nonetheless, let me know what you personally thought in the comment section below. Do you think the androids are racist characters? Let me know about that in the comment section below. What did you think about my comparisons from the past meets the old? Were you offended? I really don't care, but let me know what you personally thought in the comment section below. Android 13 as a villain. Do you like him? Do you hate him? The censorship, what did you think about it? What do you think about Goku getting hit in the dick? It's pretty interesting to know that that kind of happened in a movie. But it was a little too much. Or was it? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. This has been John 12.